The crash landing was violent, disorienting, but nothing compared to what came next. Lieutenant Kieran Holt stumbled out of the wreckage into a lavender-skied jungle, only to be surrounded by towering warrior women. Their eyes locked onto him, with a hunger he couldn't comprehend. Then one stepped forward, her voice a command. "I claim the Skyfallen male." Kieran had faced alien threats before, but this? A planet where men were rare treasures fought over by fierce women? This was a battle he wasn't prepared for. The jungle of Valkyria stretched endlessly under that unnatural lavender sky, its air carrying the sharp tang of something like crushed copper and damp stone. Kieran's boots sank slightly into the thick moss underfoot as warriors surrounded him, their towering forms blocking what little light filtered through the violet canopy. Each woman stood at least a foot taller than him, their exposed skin marked with geometric tattoos that pulsed faintly blue when they moved. Their footsteps made no sound as they shifted positions, forming precise ranks without spoken command. The tallest wore bands of silver around her biceps, marks of rank that gleamed against dark purple skin. Their eyes never left him, pupils dilating as they took in his smaller frame, his lack of markings, the way his Terran muscles tapered, differently from their own corded strength. One woman near the front licked her lips, a quick flicker of tongue across pointed teeth. An elder pushed through the ranks, her white robes whispering across the moss. Nahil's back curved with age, but her grip was iron when she seized Kieran's wrist. 5 generations since a male survived the trials, she said, her voice like dry leaves. The wars took them. The birthing beds stopped yielding their voices. Her clawed thumb pressed into his pulse point, testing. Your blood runs differently. The warriors tensed. One with braided crimson hair shifted her spear, not a threat, but a claim. Their civilization had perfected this dance over centuries, the way the women's shoulders angled toward the strongest among them, how the youngest warriors kept glancing at a particular fighter with the silvered scars across her collarbones. Their hierarchy lived in these details, in the precise distance they kept from one another. Kieran's jaw set. He'd seen this before on frontier worlds. Cultures that prized scarcity, turning people into symbols. But never like this. Never where. He was the rare commodity being appraised. The crimson-haired warrior reached for a leather cord at her belt. Some kind of binding ritual already starting. He stepped back. Their shock rippled through the ranks. One warrior actually hissed. Nahil's nostrils flared, head tilting as if he'd spoken some impossible phrase. Behind them, the temple fortress rose from the jungle, hexagonal towers stacked like wasp nests humming faintly. The women's tattoos brightened in response, their blue glow intensifying as the tension built. "You misunderstand," Kieran said, keeping his hands visible but away from their reaching fingers. "I'm not ours to take," finished the scarred warrior, stepping forward. Her voice dropped to something dangerously quiet. "That's not how this world works, Skyfallen." Around them, the jungle exhaled a warm, cloying scent, something floral mixed with the musk of large predators. The warrior's pupils had gone wide and black, their breathing sinking in a way that prickled the hair on Kieran's neck. He'd seen pack behavior before, but this was different, more calculated. Nahil watched him with something almost like pity. "They'll die for you," she said softly. "Not to protect you, to own you." Her claw traced the air near his face. "You breathe. Therefore you are contested." Somewhere high in the vines, a creature shrieked. The warriors didn't flinch. Their attention remained locked on Kieran, on the way his throat moved when he swallowed, on the flush of human blood beneath his skin. The scent of their excitement thickened the air, metallic and sweet. He counted 7 visible weapons within grabbing distance. Traditional societies always had rules, though. Loopholes. Kieran straightened to his full height, still laughably small compared to them, and bared his teeth in what these warriors might mistake for a challenge. Let them think him fierce. Let them hesitate. The crimson-haired one grinned back, slow and knowing. She liked that. They all did. Their fingers twitched toward blades, toward his arms, toward each other. The claiming had already begun, not with words, but in the way. Their bodies angled toward conflict. "What happens?" Kieran asked carefully. "If I refuse?" Nahil's laughter crackled like kindling. "You'll learn." Ground fog curled around their ankles as the warriors closed ranks. Somewhere beyond the trees, a drum began to beat. Not a warning. A summons. The real power on Valkyria was waking up. The crimson-haired warrior, Roxa, stepped forward with her spear planted in the moss. Her voice carried across the clearing. "I claim the sky-fallen male." The words weren't a request. Around her, the other women's tattoos flared brighter, their glow shifting from blue to a deep violet. Ritual. Kieran recognized the cadence, the way they all inhaled in unison like actors hitting their marks. Two warriors hauled him forward by the arms. Their grip didn't hurt, yet, but the way their thumbs pressed into his tendons promised bruises. Roxa produced a length of woven metal from her belt, the strands alive with that same pulsing light as the tattoos. She looped it around, his wrist with ceremonial precision. The cord tightened on its own, cold against his skin. "No!" Kieran's voice cut through the ritual murmurs. He yanked his arm back. The cord held firm, but the warriors holding him stiffened. Their nostrils flared. Apparently no one had expected resistance. A murmur rippled through the gathered women. The patterns of their glowing tattoos fractured, individual designs breaking rank as they turned to each other. One young warrior near the back dropped her spear with a clatter. Nahil shouldered through the crowd, her white robes hissing against the undergrowth. The old laws permit contested claims. Her clawed finger pointed at a warrior near the front with silver scars across her collarbones. Yelva's lineage traces back 6 generations to the first mothers. Her rights supersede Roxa's. Roxa's fingers flexed around her spear. The air smelled suddenly of ozone, that charged moment before a storm breaks. Kieran counted 3 women edging. Closer to Yelva, their stances protective. Factions. Then silence. Absolute. The warriors all turned as one toward the jungle's edge. Even the insects stopped buzzing. A figure emerged from between 2 massive ferns, taller than the others, her skin a deeper violet, her tattoos not glowing but burning with steady gold. Sarav. She moved like water flowing between stones. The warriors bowed their heads, but their eyes followed her, some with reverence, others with something sharper. Sarave stopped an arm's length from Kieran, studying him with pupils that were vertical slits in amber irises. Up close he could see scars webbing across her knuckles, the faint silver lines across her throat. A fighter, a survivor, skyfallen. Her voice was lower than he expected, the accent rounding the edges of the word. She reached out, gripped the claiming cord around his wrist. The metal strands unraveled at her touch, falling to the moss with a sound like chimes. Roxa made a noise in her throat. Sarave didn't acknowledge it. "The soul claim," Sarave announced. The reaction was immediate. Sharp inhales, hands flying to weapon grips. Even Nahil's wrinkled face tightened. Kieran didn't understand, but he recognized power plays. This was something rare, something dangerous. Sarav continued, her words measured. 10 cycles under my roof, no binding, no marks. She tilted her head slightly. "Unless you choose them." The tension in the clearing was thick enough to taste. Kieran could see the calculations happening behind the warrior's eyes, weighing tradition against curiosity, the known hierarchy against this abrupt shift. Sarav's gold tattoos flickered when she moved, casting odd shadows across the moss. "I'm not property," Kieran said. Sarav's mouth curved, not quite a smile. "No," she agreed. "You're a variable." Behind her, Roxa's grip on her spear turned knuckle white. Yelva exhaled sharply through her nose. The warriors were still as statues, waiting. Kieran weighed his options. The wreckage of his ship smoldered somewhere in the jungle. No comms, no crew, no way home. 10 cycles, he said. Sarav inclined her head. Around them, the jungle exhaled, wind stirring the ferns, the distant call of some unseen creature. Disappointment and anticipation hung equally in the air. The queen turned without another word, her gold-marked back facing the crowd in clear dismissal. The warriors hesitated, then began melting back into the trees, some casting lingering looks at Kieran, others whispering behind their hands. Only Roxa remained, her stare carving into him like a blade. Nihil shuffled forward, her claws clicking against a stone. "Clever," she muttered to Kieran. "The queen's residence is warded. Out there?" She jerked her chin toward the jungle. "You wouldn't last a night." Kieran watched Sarav's retreating form, the way the warriors gave her space without being told. Protection or prison? He'd walked into both before. Roxa stepped so close he could smell the oil on her blades. 10 cycles, she echoed, her breath warm against his ear. Then she was gone, slipping into the undergrowth with barely a rustle. The temple fortress loomed ahead, its hexagonal towers catching the lavender light. Kieran flexed his wrist where the claiming cord had been. The skin was unmarked, but something prickled beneath it, not pain. Awareness. Sarave was already halfway up the carved stone path, not looking back. He followed. Behind him, the jungle swallowed the clearing whole. Sarav's fortress rose from the cliffs like a blade thrust up from Valkyria's bones. Its obsidian walls drank in the lavender light, turning nearly invisible against the sky. Kieran had to tilt, his head back to see the top, a jagged crown of interlocking towers where winged shapes circled. No visible entrances, no guards. The Queen of the Blooded Sands didn't need them. She left him standing in the central chamber for 3 hours. No benches, no water. Just smooth black stone underfoot and walls carved with thousands of tiny figures, women battling, giving birth, dying. The air smelled faintly of lightning-struck metal. Kieran studied the carvings. Every 5th panel showed a male figure, always smaller, always kneeling. You count well for a Skyfallen. Sarave's voice came from nowhere. She emerged from what had been a solid wall, her gold tattoos dimmed to embers. She carried no weapons, wore no crown, just a simple gray wrap that left her scarred arms bare. The 7th panel on the eastern wall. What does it show? Kieran turned. He'd memorized the sequence. A woman holds a knife to a man's throat while another watches. Wrong. Sarave stepped closer. Her pupils were fully dilated now, swallowing the amber. She holds the knife to her own throat. The man watches. Kieran frowned at the carving. The perspective was deliberate. At first glance, an execution. At second, a sacrifice. A test. Sarav moved to a recess in the wall. Her fingers tapped a pattern. The chamber rumbled as a section of floor slid away, revealing a circular pit 10 meters across. At the bottom, spikes, not metal, crystal, they glowed faintly pink. Azalan spines, she said. 1 brush paralyzes for 12 hours, 2 can stop a heart. She handed him a slender rod. Calculate the angles. The rods were magnetic. Kieran pieced that much together when the first one nearly flew from his fingers. Sarave watched as he built a bridge across the pit. Shorter rods forming stable triangles, longer ones as supports. His Terran engineering held up until the final span. The last rod twisted mid-air, repelled by some buried field. Sarave caught it before it hit the spikes. Valkyrian iron, she said. Adjacent poles attract here. Another test failed. This became their rhythm. Mornings in the pit room with its shifting puzzles. Afternoons in the archive where Sarav made him read aloud from scrolls older than Terran. Cities. The texts spoke of battles fought and won, of male children left on mountainsides, of a time when the skies burned and only the women's bodies could bear the new world. You teach me your history, Kieran said one evening as they stood on an open terrace. The wind carried the scent of distant fires. But not your present. Sarava touched a panel. The fortress walls turned transparent, revealing the jungle below. Tiny figures moved, warrior squads on patrol, merchants hauling carts. 3 distinct groups, all giving each other wide berth. The temple mothers hold the birthing rites. The Felderin control the mines. I command the armies. an alliance that lasts only so long as no clan grows too strong. Kieran watched a scuffle break out near the tree line. A warrior in red, Roxa, dragged someone from the bushes. The captive's wrists were bound, male, Saravi's fingers flexed. The window opaqued. You think your democracy better? I think forcing half your population into hiding is a waste. The temperature dropped. Sarav's tattoos flared gold. For a heartbeat, Kieran thought she might strike him. Then she laughed, a real startled sound. Spoken like a man who's never had to fight for a seat at the table. She showed him the armory next. Not weapons. Records. Shelf after shelf of leather-bound logs containing combat analyses, supply routes, casualty reports. This was Sarav's true power. Not her undefeated streak in the arena, but her mind. Her ability to track every variable. Kieran ran his fingers down a battle log. You're preparing for war. Always. She pulled a newer volume from the shelf, this one marked with Terran script. Captured comms chatter, star charts, his own service record. Your people explore, mine survive. He told her about Earth then. The messy, glorious chaos of billions living together. The laws that changed when enough voices demanded it. Sarav listened the way she did everything, still as stone, absorbing. You believe words can replace blood, she said at last. I believe the right words at the right time can save rivers of it. Something shifted in her face. A crack in the mask. She reached for another scroll but stopped midway. Just for a second her hand hovered, empty. Then it fisted. Kieran dreamt of his crew that night, the ones who'd gone down with the ship, the ones who might still be alive in the jungle. His quarters had no locks, but the air pressure changed when someone approached. He felt it now, the subtle shift, the scent of ozone. Saravi stood in the doorway. No armor, just a loosely tied robe and 2 steaming cups. Your lieutenant, she said. The one with the burn scar. Bastion. Kieran sat up. The stone bed had left grooves in his back. Sarav handed him a cup. The liquid inside was black and smelled like licorice. He lives. Roxa's squad found 3 of your men near the western ridges. They're being held by the Felderin. Kieran's pulse jumped. He stayed still. You want to go to them? Saravi said it as fact. I made an oath. She studied him over the rim of her cup. In the low light, her scars looked like silver wire. I could order them brought here. Would you? The silence stretched. Somewhere deep in the fortress, crystal chimes rang. A warning system. Sarav sat, her cup down untouched. The Ash Riders have challenged my rule. They move in the dark places, whispering that I grow weak, that I shelter a Skyfallen instead of claiming him. She touched the freshest scar on her collarbone, a jagged line still, pink at the edges. If I show favor to your men in open daylight, the Riders will call blood debt. Kieran understood. Not a refusal, a calculation. He'd seen officers make the same face, weighing lives against objectives. Then I'll go alone, he said. Sarava's smile was razor thin. You'd die before sunset. She rose, her shadow huge on the wall. But I admire the attempt. At dawn, she had him brought to the fortress's lowest level. A circular chamber with a sand floor. 2 practice spears lay crossed in the center. You want your men? Sarave tossed him one of the spears. It was lighter than he expected, carbon fiber with an electrified tip. First, learn not to embarrass me. She attacked without warning. Not the choreographed moves of a sparring partner. The brutal, efficient strikes of someone who'd killed often. Kieran blocked more by instinct than skill. His third parry connected. Sarav's eyebrow lifted. She increased the speed, testing his reactions. By the 10th pass, sweat soaked his tunic. You're holding back, Kieran panted. You're still standing. He feinted left, went right. The spear's tip grazed her ribs. Sarav froze. Her tattoos flared white hot. For a heartbeat, Kieran thought he'd gone too far. Then she inclined her head. Better. They drilled until his arms trembled. Sarave corrected his grip, his stance, the angle of his strikes. Not kindness. Preparation. When they stopped to rest, she threw him a waterskin. The Feldaran elder has a daughter, she said. Talik, she'll bargain for your men's release, but the price will be high. Name it. Sarav's fingers tapped her spear. She'll want you. The air left Kieran's lungs. Not like that. Sarave's lip curled. She believes mingling your bloodline with hers will produce stronger offspring. A tactical advantage. She leaned closer. The scent of her, ozone and iron, filled his space. Are your men worth that price? Before he could answer, crystal chimes echoed through the chamber. Not the slow warning tones from before, a rapid staccato alarm. Sarav was already moving. She palmed the wall, bringing up a glowing holographic map. Red dots swarmed near the eastern ridges. Ash Riders, she said. They've found your ship's wreckage. Kieran's grip tightened on the spear. Somewhere out there, his crew was either dead, captured, or fighting for their lives. Sarav watched him, waiting. The game had changed. The Ash Riders came at dusk. Kieran saw them first as shadows between the trees, figures draped in gray mesh that mirrored the jungle's shifting colors. They moved without sound, their bare feet, leaving no prints on the moss. Saravi's fingers tightened around the balcony rail when she spotted them. Her tattoos pulsed once, a warning flare. Roxa burst into the chamber moments later, her braids matted with what looked like soot. She carried the acrid scent of burnt metal. 3 Terran males captured near the eastern ruins, she said without preamble. Ash Rider sentries triggered a distress beacon hidden in their gear. Sarave's expression didn't change. Alive? Barely. Roxa's eyes flicked to Kieran. One kept shouting coordinates. Another had your insignia carved into his forearm. Lieutenant Bastion. Kieran knew the man's habit of branding himself with unit markers. His stomach twisted. Sarav turned her palm up. A holographic map flickered to life, showing the wreckage zone. Red dots clustered near a canyon ridge. Too many to be just Ash Riders. They're gathering the clans, she said. Roxa shifted her weight. Talik met with their commander yesterday. The council supplied them with jump wires and venom darts. The admission hung in the air. Sarav's own advisors were arming her enemies. Kieran watched her process this. The slight tightening around her eyes, the controlled rise of her chest. Her fingers tapped the rail in a pattern that matched the fortress's warning chimes. You want me to retrieve them, Kieran said. Sarav exhaled through her nose. If you walk into that camp, they'll skin you alive and parade your bones through the high temples. Then what's the play? She didn't answer immediately. The map shimmered, zooming in on a narrow pass between 2 rock formations. Sarave's fingers moved through the hologram, sketching routes. The Ash Riders' territory has weak points. Old mining tunnels here, collapsed bridges here. Roxa made a low sound in her throat. You're sending us underground. Not you. Sarav's gaze slid to Kieran. Him. The plan unfolded in terse phrases. Elora and Tassa, 2 warriors Sarav trusted, would flank him. Roxa would provide a distraction at the main camp. Talik would be waiting, at the extraction point with medical supplies, for a price. Kieran studied the map. This route takes us straight through their nesting grounds. They don't nest there anymore. Sarave's voice was flat. Not after the last challenge. Understanding clicked. The Ash Riders avoided certain tunnels not because of structural weakness, but because they were mass graves. Sarave's handiwork. Roxa touched her spear to her forehead, some warrior's gesture Kieran didn't recognize. The Feldaran won't honor old agreements if the council's turned. They will, Sarave said. If Talik believes the Skyfallen male will still visit her bed after this. Silence. Kieran met her gaze. No apology there, just strategy. The Queen played the board as she saw it. They left at moonset. Lyra and Tassa moved like extensions of the jungle itself, their bodies painted with something that absorbed light rather than reflected it. Kieran followed their lead, stepping where they stepped, freezing when they froze. The air grew thick with the scent of rot as they descended into the tunnel system. Something crunched underfoot. Bones, not just animal. Femurs and ribs stacked deliberately in alcoves, skulls staring blankly from niches in the walls. Elra's hand signaled stop. Voices echoed ahead. Ash Rider sentries arguing over rations. Kieran caught the word Skyfallen twice, the second time with a sneer. Tassa edged forward, blade drawn. The sentries never saw her coming. 2 quick flicks of her wrist, and their bodies slumped without sound. She caught them before they hit the ground, lowering them gently to avoid noise. The tunnel opened into a cavern lit by bioluminescent fungi. The Terran prisoners hung from the ceiling in woven cages, their sweat dripping onto the rocks below. Bastion was conscious, barely. His eyes widened when he spotted Kieran. The rescue itself was methodical. Alara scaled the cavern wall while Tassa kept watch. Kieran caught Bastion when the cage dropped, clamping a hand over his mouth to muffle the gasp. The lieutenant's ribs stood out sharply under his skin. "You took your time," Bastion whispered. His voice was shredded. Kieran checked the other 2, alive but unconscious. "Can you walk? Try and stop me." They almost made it out clean. Then a horn sounded from the surface, Roxa's distraction. Except the Ash Riders didn't rush toward, yet they turned deeper into the tunnels. Toward the rescue team, Laura hissed. They knew. The pieces snapped together, the too convenient prisoner location, the lack of guards. Roxa had set them up. Kieran hefted Bastion's arm over his shoulder. Change of plan. They moved toward the extraction point anyway because there were no alternatives. The Ash Riders herded them like prey, driving them upward through narrower tunnels. Kieran's shoulder scraped against rough stone. Bastion's breathing grew ragged, then light. Not the lavender sky, torchlight. Talik waited with a full squad of Feldarin warriors, their tattoos a cooler blue than Sarava's forces, her eyes locked onto Kieran. "You're late." Behind them, the Asho riders spilled into the clearing, not attacking, waiting. Talik's hand rested on a vial at her belt, neutralizing agent for the spines, probably. Her price for helping. Bastion coughed. "What's the play, Lieutenant?" Kieran watched Talik's warriors fan out, counted the Ash Riders, did the math. The Feldarin could turn them over just as easily as save them. New negotiation, he told Talik. "You get me. They go free." Talik's smile showed teeth. "I already have you." Something whistled through the air. An Ash Rider collapsed, a dart in her neck. Then another. Roxa dropped from the trees, her spear glittering with fresh blood. Not dead. Not even late. Right on time for her real mission, tracking the Feldarin betrayal. Cha erupted. Tassa and Elra formed a protective circle around the wounded Terrans, while Roxa cut a path toward Talik. The Feldarin leader barely flinched. She raised a hand not to attack but to signal her warriors to stand down. "You misunderstand," Talik called over the noise. "We're not your enemies today." Kieran didn't have time to parse that before another horn sounded. Deeper, more resonant. The Ash Riders froze mid-stride. Sarav stepped into the clearing alone. No armor, no weapons, just the gold tattoos blazing across her skin like live wires. The Ash Riders shrank back. Cora, their leader, emerged from the ranks. Her gray mesh robes were cinched with belts of human finger bones. "You break tradition," she spat at Sarav. The queen didn't bother looking at her. Kieran, status. 3. Alive. 2 critical. Sarave nodded. Then to Cora. "I accept your challenge." The word sent a ripple through the assembled warriors. Even Roxa stiffened. Cora hissed. "Not here. Not like this. The arena. Choose now or forfeit." Sarav's voice carried across the clearing. "These are my terms. Win and you'd take my throne. Lose and the Ash Riders stand down for 5 generations. Talik made a sharp gesture. Her warriors retreated a step, giving space. Kieran felt the shift. This wasn't just about rescue anymore. Sarave was gambling her crown on a single fight. Cora's hand went to her hip. A curved blade gleamed in the torchlight. To first blood, Sarave smiled. It wasn't pleasant. To surrender. The fight lasted 17 seconds. Cora was fast, blurring forward with that curved blade aiming for Sarave's throat. The queen sidestepped, caught Cora's wrist, and twisted. The snap of bone echoed off the rocks. Kieran had seen Sarave train. He'd felt her controlled strength. This was something else. Every movement calculated to inflict maximum humiliation without permanent damage. Shoulder dislocation, knee hyperextension, a strike to the solar plexus that left Cora gasping in the dirt. When it was over, Sarave hauled the Ash Rider leader up by her hair. Your warriors withdraw. Your tunnels stay sealed. These Terrans are under my protection. Cora spat blood. The council won't allow... Sarav dropped her. The council, she said, just lost their best weapon. Talik's expression was unreadable as she passed Kieran the vial. Tell your queen the Felderan honor our agreements. Bastion coughed again, wetter this time. Roxa scooped him up like he weighed nothing. The walk back to the fortress was quiet. Sarav kept pace beside Kieran, her breathing barely elevated. You knew, he said. Some. All of it? She glanced at the unconscious men being carried ahead. Enough. The pieces rearranged in Kieran's mind. The test in the tunnels. Roxa's timely arrival. Sarav's appearance not as rescuer, but as challenger. This hadn't been a rescue mission. It had been a trap for the Ash Riders, for the disloyal council members, for anyone doubting the Queen's strength. Sarav's hand brushed his, just once. You asked for your men, she said. I gave you that. Kieran watched the fortress rise ahead of them, black against the lavender sky. The cost of this victory was still taking shape, in wounded men and shifting alliances, in the way Roxa now watched Sarave with something like awe. The game had changed again, and they were all still playing. The Ash Rider camp stank of fermented moss and burnt metal. Kieran crouched beside Roxa in the undergrowth, counting 8 guards patrolling the perimeter. Their gray mesh cloaks blended with the fog clinging to the ground, living camouflage that rippled as they moved. The compound itself was a haphazard collection of repurposed mining rigs and animal hide tents, all clustered around a central pit where smoke rose in twisting columns. Roxa's fingers moved in quick signs, Velkarian battle language. Elora and Tassa melted into the jungle to flank while she led Kieran toward the weakest guard post. We get in through the latrine trench, she murmured. The ditch was knee-deep in foul liquid that steamed slightly in the cool air. Kieran's boots sank into muck that clung like tar. Roxa didn't hesitate. She pulled him down until only their noses cleared the surface, then angled toward a gap in the wooden palisade. The guards 20 feet above never looked down. Inside, the camp's chaos worked in their favor. Ash Riders hurried between tents carrying weapons, food, arguing over rations. No clear chain of command. Kieran spotted 3 distinct tattoo patterns, evidence of multiple factions forced together. Arena prisoners go there. Roxa jerked her chin toward a metal cage half buried in the ground. Its bars were crusted with something dark and flaky. But your kind, probably in the smoke pit. The pit was worse. 3 Terrans hung from the ceiling in woven net bags, their bodies swaying slightly over a smoldering fire. Sato from the Horizon crew was unconscious, his lips cracked with dehydration. The other 2, Bastion and a young ensign Kieran didn't recognize, were tied back to back on a raised platform, their skin gleaming with sweat. Roxa tapped her temple twice. Watch for signals. She drifted toward the guards while Kieran edged, along the pit's rim. The heat made his eyes water. Below, glowing embers pulsed like diseased stars. One misstep and he'd join them. Skyfall and filth. The voice came from behind. A rider emerged from the smoke, her face obscured by a mask of woven bone. She raised a spear tipped with those same glowing crystals Sarav had warned about. Kieran lunged before she could sound the alarm. His forearm crushed her windpipe, his other hand twisting the spear away. The rider collapsed without a sound, but the mask clattered against stone. Across the pit, Roxa moved. Her knife flashed twice. 2 guards dropped. Tassa and Laura appeared, from opposite sides, cutting bindings, catching the Terrans as they fell. Bastion's eyes focused with difficulty on Kieran. Took you long enough. Each word cost him. Save it. Kieran slung Sato over his shoulders. The man reeked of infection. Roxa tossed him a small vial. Crush this if pursued. The smoke blinds. They retreated the way they came, the unconscious Terrans a dead weight across their shoulders. The camp seemed to hold its breath around them until a horn blast shattered the illusion. Riders poured from tents. Roxa cursed in Velkarian and kicked over a brazier, sending embers skittering. The resulting smoke screen gave them 3 seconds to duck behind a supply cart. Elora signed urgently toward the eastern tree line. Tunnel collapse. They won't expect us there. Kieran adjusted Sato's weight. His arms shook with the effort. Every instinct screamed to run, but stealth was their only chance. They inched forward while riders shouted and scrambled past. Then the ground gave way. The hidden tunnel entrance crumbled under their combined weight. Kieran hit hard, rolling to protect Sato. Rocks clattered around them as they slid downward into absolute blackness. The fall lasted just long enough for dread to set in. They landed in rushing water. The shock of cold cleared Kieran's head. Current tugged at his legs, threatening to sweep them all deeper underground. Lara caught his wrist, her nails drawing blood as she hauled him toward a narrow ledge. Bastion vomited river water. The ensign wasn't breathing. Tassa turned him on his side and struck his back once, twice. A coughing fit followed. No lights. Roxa's whisper bounced off wet stone. They track by bioglow. The river carved through what felt like an ancient lava tube, its walls smooth from centuries of erosion. Kieran's fingers found grooves, deliberate carvings worn nearly to nothing. This place had been important once. Voices echoed above. Torchlight flickered at the tunnel's mouth. Roxa pushed them all flat against the ledge as rider scouts peered down. Something about their posture suggested fear, not pursuit. They won't follow. Laura breathed. This is the dead Warrens. Kieran understood when they rounded the next bend. The skeletons weren't scattered, but stacked, row upon row of them lining the walls like macabre shelving. Some wore armor fragments. Others were little more than elongated skulls. All female. Tassa touched a finger to her lips and pointed upward. A vertical shaft, barely shoulder width, led to dim lavender light. Climbing with near-dead weight should have been impossible. Muscles tore, fingernails split. Sato woke once, screaming, before Bastion muffled him. At the top, Kieran collapsed on moss so thick it felt like a mattress. Talek stood over them, flanked by 6 warriors in deep green wraps. Felderin. Her expression was unreadable as she studied the wounded Terrans. You're missing 2, she observed. Roxa bristled. These 3 were all that remained. Talek's smile didn't reach her eyes. And yet I count 4 Ash Rider patrols converging on this clearing. She crouched beside Bastion, pressing a fingertip to his bruised ribs. You'll die before reaching Sarave's lands. Kieran's hand found the smoke vial. What do you want? The Felderin leader straightened. Same as before, your blood sample. Your word you'll visit our gene labs when this is done. She tossed a cloth, bundle at his feet, medical supplies. Or you can take your chances with the riders. Water dripped somewhere in the tunnel below. The decision should have been harder. Kieran reached for the bundle. Done. Talik's warriors formed a protective circle as they moved out, not toward Sarave's territory but east, into denser jungle. Roxa's protest died when a projectile whistled past her ear. Quiet, Talik ordered. The riders aren't your real problem now. She was right. The ambush came from the trees. Warriors with no tribal markings, their tattoos deliberately scarred over. Council forces. Fresh blood streaked their spears. Roxa pushed Kieran behind her. That's... I know. Talek drew a blade unlike any Velkarian. Design. Curved like a rider weapon but etched with Felderan symbols. The game has changed, Little Hawk. The ensuing fight was too close quarters for strategy. Kieran shielded the wounded as best he could while warriors clashed around them. Talek fought like a woman possessed, her blade cutting precise arcs through enemy ranks. Then a roar shook the jungle. Roxa grinned. Sarave. The queen arrived not with an army but alone, her golden tattoos blazing like signal fires. The mere sight of her sent half the attackers fleeing. The rest fell quickly under her onslaught. She stopped before Talek, breathing hard. The mines? Yours now. Talek wiped her blade clean. Assuming we survive the night. Sarava turned to Kieran. Her eyes flicked over the Terrans, assessing wounds. Something like relief passed over her face before the mask slid back into place. Can they walk? Bastion answered by struggling upright. Try and stop. He collapsed. They moved at a brutal pace, trading stealth for speed. The jungle thinned into rocky outcroppings, then sheer cliffs. Sarav led them up a hidden path to a cave mouth where two of her personal guard waited with stretchers. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic herbs. Nahil sat cross-legged beside a steaming basin, her claws clicking against its rim. 3 days, she pronounced after examining Sato. Maybe 4, if his will holds. Kieran sank onto a stone bench. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. Roxa crouched beside him. We got them out. He looked at Bastion's sunken eyes, the ensign's broken fingers, Sato's fevered twitching. At what cost? Sarave answered from the cave entrance where she studied the horizon. The Ash Riders are mobilizing. The council has openly sided with Korra. She turned, her silhouette framed by that unnatural lavender sky. Velkaria is at war. Kieran stood, though his legs threatened to buckle. We should leave. You can't. Roxa's voice was quiet. No ship within reach, no safe passage. The weight of it settled over him, not just the danger, but the realization that part of him didn't want to go. That same part noted how Sarav's shoulders tensed at his words, how her gaze lingered on the medical supplies being unpacked. Nahil chuckled darkly. Now you understand, Skyfallen. We're all trapped now. Outside, the first war drums began to beat. The drums started before dawn. Their sound carried through the cavernous arena, vibrating up through the tiered stone benches where hundreds of warriors sat waiting. The sand below was raked smooth, so pale it almost glowed under Velkaria's lavender sky. Kieran stood at the edge with the other outsiders, his fingers tight around the rail. The scent of crushed herbs and iron-heavy blood filled the air. Sarave entered first. She wore no armor, just a simple gray tunic that left her scarred arms bare. Her golden tattoos pulsed with light, casting long shadows across the sand. The crowd's murmur rose and fell. Some cheered, others hissed. Then Vortis of the Ash Riders appeared from the opposite gate. His cloak was made of finger bones threaded on wire. His tattoos pulsed black instead of blue or gold. They circled. The first strike came so fast Kieran barely saw it, Vortis's curved blade flashing toward Sarave's throat. She pivoted, letting the edge whisper past her skin. The crowd roared. They traded blows with terrifying precision, each movement calculated to test defenses rather than kill. Kieran understood. This wasn't a fight to the death. It was a statement. By the third exchange, Vortis was bleeding from a cut across his ribs. Sarave had taken a shallow gash to her forearm. Neither seemed to notice. Vortis feigned left, then struck right, his blade aiming not for flesh but for the sand at Sarav's feet. He kicked up a cloud directly into her face. The crowd gasped. A cheap move. Sarave didn't stagger. She dropped to one knee and swept Vortis's legs out from under him. They rolled apart, both coming up with weapons ready. The tension thickened. This time when they clashed, the strikes turned brutal. No more testing. Kieran moved before he could think. He vaulted the rail and landed in the sand just as Vortis swung for Sarav's exposed back. His shouted, "Hold!" echoed oddly in the arena's acoustics. The combatants froze. The crowd went deathly silent. Nahil appeared from the judge's platform, her wrinkled face grim. "This goes against trial by choice," Kieran interrupted. The words came automatically, something he'd read in Sarav's archives weeks ago. Ancient. Law supersedes combat when both sides consent. Vortis spat blood. "Who speaks for the Queen?" Sarav's eyes locked onto Kieran. After a long moment, she inclined her head. The ritual space was cleared. 3 circles drawn in the sand, one for the past, one for the present, one for the uncertain future. Kieran stood at the center as question master while Saravi and Vortis took their places. "First truth," he said. "Show us the wound." Saravi went first. She knelt and placed both hands into the first circle. The sand darkened where her fingers touched, forming images. A younger Saravi standing over the bodies of her sisters after a failed rebellion. The Ash Riders had been hunters then, not warriors. Vortis countered by pressing his palms to the same circle. His vision showed darker scenes. Saravi's forces burning their ancestral nesting grounds. Children starving in the aftermath. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Kieran watched their faces as the images played out. Clan tattoos pulsed differently. Some, bright with agreement, others dim with shame. "Second truth," Kieran said. "Show us the now." Sarav's vision shimmered into being. A map of Velcaria with clan territories marked in gold. It showed the mineral wealth beneath Ashrider lands, the trade routes controlled by the Temple Mothers, the rich farmlands held by Sarav's blooded sands. A delicate balance. Vortis laughed sharply. His touch brought forth darker images. Ashrider tunnels collapsing from overmining, their young dying of lung rot. The Council's hidden deals to sell those same children to off-world slavers. Murmurs swept through the audience. Kieran spotted, Roxa gripping her spear, her expression torn. Even Talik looked unsettled. "Third truth," Kieran said quietly. "Show us what comes." Neither leader moved at first. The wind picked up, stirring the sand in twisting patterns. Finally, Sarav reached out. Her vision showed the arena in ruins, the clans fractured into warring bands, off-world ships hovering above to pick at their bones. Vortis hesitated. When he finally touched the circle, his vision was nearly identical, but with one change. Single figures stood against the destruction, cloaked in gray. Sarav's robes. The silence stretched. Vortis's hands trembled. Kieran stepped back. "The choice is yours." It wasn't the Ash Rider who spoke first. A young warrior stood from the crowd, her tattoos still fresh. "We followed strength. But strength has many faces." Saravi straightened. When she spoke, her voice carried across the silent arena. "I renounce the soul claim on the sky-fallen male." Her gaze flicked to Kieran. "No more claims. No more forced bonds. From this dawn forward, let choice be our measure." Vortis staggered as if struck. The old priestess beside him placed a clawed hand on his shoulder, whispering something that made his face go slack. The trial dissolved without formal conclusion. Ash Riders melted away through the arena gates. Clan leaders clustered in tight groups, their voices low and urgent. Saravi stood alone in the sand as warriors from all factions approached, touched her hand and left without a word. Kieran found Roxa by the eastern gate, her face unreadable. "They won't forget this," she said. He shook his head. "That's the point." Aram, the youngest of Sarave's personal guard, jogged up breathlessly. "The council requests, no, demands your presence." Saravi barely glanced at her. "Tell them I'm occupied." She turned to Kieran. "Walk with me." They left through the competitor's gate where Vortis had entered. No guards followed. The path wound up toward the cliffs overlooking the jungle. The higher they climbed, The more the sounds of the arena faded, first the voices, then the drums, until only the wind remained. Saravi stopped at the cliff's edge. Far below, the jungle stretched in all directions, broken only by the glittering threads of rivers. Her golden tattoos no longer blazed, just a soft glow now, like embers banked for the night. 5 generations, she said. Since an outsider spoke for a queen. Kiran watched the distant shapes of flying creatures circling above the trees. You knew I would? Sarav's posture shifted, the queen giving way to something more vulnerable. I hoped. Down in the jungle, a flock of some winged species took flight, their bodies momentarily blocking the lavender sky. The wind carried their cries up to the cliffs, not the shrieks of predators, but something almost musical. Sarav exhaled slowly. The council will push back. I know. The Ash Riders may still fracture. I know. She turned to face him fully. And you? Will you stay? There was no demand in the question, no power play, just a woman asking. The wind pulled at Kiran's hair, smelling of damp stone and something sweet he couldn't name. He looked toward the horizon where his crashed ship lay buried in the jungle. Then back at Sarave. I choose to stay. She didn't smile. But for the first time since he'd met her, Sarav's shoulders relaxed. The gold in her tattoos brightened just slightly. Below them, the first torches were being lit in the city, not the urgent flames of war, but the steady lights of households preparing evening meals. They stood together in silence as the lavender sky deepened toward night. The mountain temple pulsed with light that night. Not the cold glow of bioluminescent vines, but the warm flicker of hundreds of oil lamps suspended from the ancient rafters. Priestesses in white robes moved between clusters of warriors and Starfleet officers, their hands offering cups of something that smelled like black honey and burnt oranges. No segregated factions tonight. Ash Riders stood shoulder to shoulder with Blooded Sands warriors, their tattoos shining gold and violet in turns. Kiran stood near the central fire pit, watching Sato argue navigation vectors with a young Feldaran engineer. The Terran lieutenant's gestures were too broad, his laughter too loud, still recovering from fever, but the Velkarian listened intently, occasionally sketching symbols in the air between them. Across the chamber, Roxa demonstrated close quarter combat techniques to a pair of Starfleet Marines. Her movements were slower than usual, more controlled, allowing the humans to follow. Saravi entered last, as was tradition. Gone were the gray wraps and battle scars on display. Tonight she wore deep blue fabric that shimmered when she moved, her hair loosely braided with thin silver chains. The gathered crowd didn't bow, but their tattoos brightened in unison. Silent acknowledgement. She stopped beside Kiran, her shoulder brushing his. Your crew adapts well, she observed. He nodded toward Bastion, who was attempting to teach clapping rhythms to a baffled group of warriors. Too well. They forget their guests. Saravi's fingers twitched, almost like she wanted to reach for his hand. Good. The feast that followed was a mix of Terran ration bars and Velkarian delicacies, skewered meats glazed with something floral, root vegetables that crackled with static when bitten. Nahil presided over the sharing ceremony, her claws clicking against a ceremonial bowl as she poured liquor into smaller cups. From the first mother's vines, she intoned, handing the first cup to Sato. Kiran watched the lieutenant hesitate, then drink deeply. His eyes watered, but he managed a nod. The gesture sent approving murmurs through the priestesses. Later, when the drums started and dancers took to the cleared floor, Kiran found himself pulled aside by Talik. The Feldaran leader's green wraps were edged with new gold thread, a concession to the changing times. You'll need this, she said, pressing a data crystal into his palm. Terran Velkarian lexicon, basic grammar, Feldaran mining coordinates for your people. Kiran turned the crystal over. Thought you wanted me in your labs. Talik's expression didn't change. Sarav showed me cross-species fertility rates last week. A beat. Abysmal. She walked away before he could respond. The music grew louder. the drums syncopating with rhythmic stomping that vibrated through the stone floor. Roxa appeared at Kieran's elbow, her usual intensity softened by drink. "Dance with me, Skyfallen." It wasn't a request. She pulled him into the swirling mass of bodies, where the steps were simple, but the hip movements defied human anatomy. Kieran did his best, earning laughter and good nerd shoves. Across the room, Sarav watched with that small, barely there smile that had become familiar. The celebration lasted until the lavender sky began to lighten. When the crowd thinned, Kieran slipped outside onto a narrow balcony overlooking the jungle. The air smelled of dew and distant rain. Sarave joined him minutes later. She leaned against the rail, her chains jingling softly. "Not what you expected?" Kieran looked back at the temple, where a mix of warriors and officers were now sleeping in tangled piles. "No. It won't last." "I know." She exhaled, her breath fogging in the cool air. "The council still resists. The southern clans haven't sworn allegiance. There will be more challenges." Kieran studied her profile, the sharp cheekbones, the scar across her temple. The weight she carried was different now, not lighter, redistributed. "You don't have to face them alone." Sarav didn't answer immediately. Below them, a flock of night flyers burst from the trees, their wings catching the first rays of dawn. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter than he'd ever heard it. "I don't intend to." They stayed there as the sky shifted from lavender to gold, listening to the temple's fading music. One of the Terrans started singing, a dirty cadence chant that soon had half the warriors attempting to echo the lyrics. 3 days later, the first joint mission left for the eastern ridges, half Valkyrian scouts, half Terran engineers carrying salvaged comm equipment. Roxa led them, her braids now threaded with Starfleet insignia pins. Kieran stood on the landing platform with Sarave, watching the group disappear into the jungle. "They'll argue the whole way," he predicted. "Good." Sarave's fingers brushed his. "Argument means they're invested." Back in the fortress, changes were already taking root. The pit room's spikes had been removed, replaced with hollow projectors for tactical simulations. Terran medics worked alongside priestesses in the healing chambers, combining Valkyrian herbal knowledge with human trauma protocols. Nahil took to wearing a Starfleet chronometer around her neck, though she insisted it was purely for studying the enemy. At night, Kieran and Sarave pored over star charts in her quarters, plotting the best locations for signal beacons, their hands occasionally bumping over the controls. One evening, as the double moons cast overlapping shadows across the maps, Sarave paused. "Your people will come eventually." Kieran didn't deny it. He traced the estimated trajectory of rescue ships. "They'll want reports, diplomatic channels. And you?" He looked up at her, really looked. At the woman who'd tried to own him, then freed him, then let herself be challenged because of him. The queen who still flinched slightly at unexpected touches, who drank her tea too hot, who had memorized half his Terran jokes despite claiming they were nonsense. Kieran folded the star chart. "I'll tell them Valkyria needs an ambassador." Sarave's golden tattoos brightened for a heartbeat before dimming again. "Not a consort? Too fancy a title." He reached across the table. "Partner will do." Her fingers tangled with his, calloused palm against calloused palm. Outside, the jungle exhaled its evening chorus. Creatures calling, leaves rustling. Somewhere the distant clang of Roxa yelling at someone about proper weapon maintenance. Valkyria wasn't perfect. The clans still bickered. Old prejudices died. Hard. The council sent missives weekly about tradition and the dangers of change. But in that moment, with Sarave's thumb brushing his wrist and the twin moons shining through the open window, Kieran knew something with absolute certainty. He was exactly where he was meant to be. The lavender sky deepened to dusk as Sarav walked the rebuilt temple grounds, her fingers laced with Kieran's. Below them, Felderin and Terran engineers worked side by side, repairing the last of the seismic damage from the war. Rox's laughter carried up from the training yards where she drilled mixed squads in adapted combat forms. Nahil had said it best at the last council meeting. Velkaria's strength was never in dominance, but in adaptation. Kieran squeezed Sarav's hand, his skin now marked with one deliberate tattoo, twin circles interlocked. Not a claim. A choice. The first stars appeared overhead. Neither looked up. They were already home,